to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me on the show today, Debbie G and Neo Positivity. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Now, Debbie G is going to be joining us in about 10 to 15 minutes or so, but in the moment, my lovely wife Louise is back for a second visit, which is something remarkable because anyone who knows the history knows she's convinced that anytime she's on the show, the technology fails. And so we've convinced her to get past that today. And so thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And Neil, how you doing? Hope you had a great holiday.
Life is good, and the holidays reflected that. I'll just say it like that.
Hey, you can't ask for anything more than that. That's perfect. That's
Well,
absolutely.
You could.
Well, okay, yeah. You can set the goal higher. Okay.
Nah, it's cool. I have a huge speech coming up on the 5th. I'm talking life-changing. It's actually going to be on the 8th, but the event starts on the 5th, and I'm also speaking on the 5th, but on the 8th is big. So I am on cloud 9. I have rewritten my speech 5 times.
Whoa.
And the first 4 times it's a 10-minute speech, changing out paragraphs. But this last time, the 5th time, was a total scrap and redo. And that's what I did at the last big speech. So I'm okay with it. Let's go.
Okay.
Good luck.
That's called preparation.
You know, something about the creative process. And I'd like to talk about that today, especially with Louise. Something about the creative process that it's beautiful, it's amazing, and if you're in it, mentally in it, feeling it, it's just like you know you're doing right. You know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing to get the best out of whatever it is that you're doing, and it's a beautiful thing. And the people who are too pressed with the world and what's going on around them, bills and stuff, to capitalize on that, I really want to wrap them in and get them on that page because it's beautiful. It feels good. It's something you should be doing every day. Yeah.
It's an interesting point you're making because I've been dealing with the creative process myself in the last few days. I mean, I've got my own event coming up toward the second part of January, which you're a part of. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
That'll be on the 18th and 19th. You'll be hearing more about it here on the show. But there's something that goes along with that creative process because we aren't always high. We aren't always in that high vibrational space, but we're still working on the creation part. And that's when the creation part actually gets a little bit nerve-wracking, perhaps is the best way to describe it. And when that happens, I have to remind myself, take a break, get away from it, go back onto a higher vibe, then go back to it again, because otherwise you start putting out that's how the first 4 drafts come out, right? The 5th draft comes out when you get into that high vibe space and you stay there.
It was, it's crazy. I think it was like during the second draft was when I realized that I needed to focus on the creative process as opposed to the words that are on the paper. And once I focused on the creative process and not the words, I started to get excited about the words. And because I read them again and I was like, man, that's good. Damn, I'm good. And that's when I started, feeling good about the situation. And then I started coming up with ideas while I'm in and from, I should say, that good place. And those ideas were going absolutely berserk. And I was in the shower last night and I had an idea of how to restart, a new start to it. A total new start. And it just spawned a whole new thing. And the craziest part this is the craziest part. I got a 10-minute speech that I'm trying to condense an hour into 10 minutes. And with the law of attraction, so many ins and outs, it's very hard to decide what you want to get out there. And so I laid out my top 10 points. I was going to put 1 minute towards each point, but 1 minute is enough. You need at least 2 minutes to really stress something because you might have to give examples. You might want to, give a mental exercise or an affirmation. And so I said, you know what? I kept cramming and deleting stuff, trying to get it down to 10 minutes. And I said, you know what? If I put more subjects in one paragraph, then I'm freeing up space. And I'm actually really good at doing that in my other writings. And so I was able to get that 10 minutes into like 6.5 minutes.
Wow.
And that opened up. That's when I went back to the first file and said, okay, let's look at what I deleted. And let's add that in here somewhere. Not towards the last 4 minutes of the speech, but I might be able to implement it and to inject it into the first 6 minutes. And that's what I did. So I ended up with a 10-minute cluster of everything I've learned from you guys and everyone else over the last years and my personal experiences. And I'm happy about it. I'm ready to knock some socks off.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, it's kind of, I don't know about you. For me, the creative process, particularly with a speech, but any kind of presentation, whether it be speech, online, video, whatever, for me, it's about trying to find a way to quickly get to telling a story. How quickly can I get to that story? Because once I'm in the story mode, then it's easy to pull the stuff in. I can refer to this, I can refer to that, I can refer to the other thing, and it just comes bang, bang, bang. It's getting the story going that I find to be the most challenging part. And it's where I give a lot of my attention to. Plus, I mean, well, when you do a podcast, you're constantly looking for stories anyway. You live episode by episode with the stories. I mean, you can't wait for the next one to come up, and there's usually, 3 or 4 of them that happen in an episode. So you kind of get story oriented after a while. But that story, man, that for me is the biggest part.
I want to pay you a compliment real quick, Walt. Every time you start talking, I have to grab my notebook. I'm like, so you get into this zone where I'm like, he's going to say some profound stuff. So if you ever see me start hustling, it's because I just had that trigger. He's about to say something. I need to that.
Well, thank you. I'm honored and privileged.
Yes, this is my magic pen. It retains all the information for me. Nah, it's something about it. I mean, we're always creating. I mean, with every step you take, I guess you're creating in some form. What am I going to eat for dinner? Oh, create ideas and stuff like that. And that's cool. So we are creative beings, but it's something about when you're creating in the area of something you love, what you love to do, like a mechanic loves working on cars or an engineer loves creating those components. And when you get in those headspace, that's when Bill Gates, is in his garage for 10 years just creating. It comes up with the internet. That's when the great things really come out. The songs that have really made it, the ones that have really been hits, where if you pay attention to the backstory, they're based off of something that actually happened to that artist.
Yeah.
You got a million artists talking about Lamborghinis and all this stuff that they don't have and they don't make it anywhere, but you got somebody telling a real heartfelt story, and the song goes crazy, even if it's not even it doesn't even sound like a good song, but it just gets popular because of where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's resonance.
That has to do with following what you're meant to do on this planet, what you love to do the most. That's where you get your passion from. I don't believe in writer's block. I don't. People have talked about it back in my old me. I probably did believe in it, but I haven't. Not since I've really started on this whole law of attraction journey, because it's when you pull it, when you open up and be quiet and ask for it, something always comes. Something always comes, and it's always greatness. So I don't really believe in writer's block anymore. I think you can tap.
It's interesting you mentioned that about writer's block, and that you mentioned it in the context of law of attraction and conscious creation, because I think you're right. I think writer's block is trying to write from a low vibe space, which doesn't work. First of all, you can't create very well there.
No.
And secondly, anything that you do create there, well, unless you're Stephen King, it's not going to be worth reading.
And you know what? I'll even attach this to the whole Stephen King thing. When he's writing those stories, he's in a high vibration.
Yeah,
he's like, yo, that scene's going to be banging, or that scene's going to be great. So he's writing it from a high vibration. It was just his path to give us horror novels, horror movies and stuff like that. But he's definitely in that vibration. And you just said something that kind of makes me think: can you create from a low vibration?
Sure, we do it all the time. It's just we create stuff we don't like.
Well, yeah, you got that.
We're really good at that. I mean, let's be honest. The overwhelming population spends large amounts of time in the low vibration space creating a whole bunch of stuff they don't like, and then that gives them more to complain about. Right?
I would like to think, and I want you guys' numbers. I would like to think that I spend more than 51% of my day positive.
That's my goal
Where do you think you're at?
right now. Probably about 60-40.
I like it. I mean, you're above 51, so
I love it. Considering it
Luis.
used to be 2080, I think it's a fabulous improvement.
Yeah.
You can
What do you
attest to
think?
that, by the way.
Oh God, yeah. Oh,
What do you
God.
think, Luis? Where's your number
Where
at?
am I at?
Wait, hold on. Before you answer where you're at, I want to hear where you think Walt is at. No, I'm just playing.
Neo, he's right here.
Good answer.
I can't answer that, but I'll answer about myself first. Where am I at numbers wise? I don't know. All I can tell you is the majority of the time, good things are happening. I can't remember anything negative happening that I wasn't able to quickly turn, something unexpected happened that I wasn't able to quickly turn around and either just let go of or find a solution to. I just don't find myself sitting in negativity at all, really, very little. I get into it sometimes talking to friends.
Yeah.
I know I did last night, but out of a 2-hour conversation, maybe it was 10 minutes, so it's maybe, I don't know. I have a hard time judging that from the inside looking out. I'd say maybe 80-20. And I don't know if you'd agree, but
I believe it.
I think there's another factor here, too. There's another factor here, because how low is low? I mean, if you think about it, disappointed is negative, but it's not really deep down negative. It's not depressed. It's not raging. It's not anger. It's not hatred. It's just, oh, I'm a little disappointed.
I kind of
It's a
gauge
very
it like,
different level of negativity.
I kind of gauge it like this. If 0 is I'm just existing, I'm not happy, I'm just going with the flow of the day. And then you got negative and plus from there. That's kind of how I put it on. But I love what Louise said about, she said the word quickly. And that is the key to everything. Negative thoughts come to me, they come to Walt, they come to Louise. They're going to keep coming. They're not going to stop. I mean, you can change the frequency, but it's a part of life that you're just going to have to accept. But catching it, as opposed to sitting in it for 20 minutes, stewing on a toilet or on your drive home, that's the key right there. Every second counts. And as far as what percentage of your day, like the question I asked, that is based on how quickly you grab on to those negative thoughts that are coming at you regardless, especially if you scroll down on Facebook.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Neo, I want to speak to what you were talking about, because when you were talking about creativity, I'm harking back to physical creativity and projects that I've had. But then you started talking about writing, and I'm like, can I relate to that? And I'm like, heck yes. I have 3 writing projects waiting, the first one to start with on Monday. And as soon as that's done, I move on to the second one. When that's done, move on to the third. And 2 of the last one is right now is just fact finding. It's not really writing, but finding the information. But the other 2, the first one is rewriting the proposal for selling our business. And I got some good feedback from my brother about how to present it. And it's got to be a story. It's got to be a story. So realizing, okay, I need to be in a high vibe when I'm doing that. So I'll make sure of that. Or if I'm having difficulty, I'll know I've got to elevate my vibration. And the second one is a series of, I don't even want to call them stories. They're like vignettes, because some are just 2 or 3 paragraphs about a cat I had and how smart he was and the things that I was just amazed that he knew and understood and did. And some of the chapters are great. They're fine. I don't really need to do much with. Others I really need to expand or rewrite or whatever. So I was been putting it off because I wasn't sure what to do. The first time I went and did it, I felt I was in a really high vibe, but I wasn't realizing that I need to do that again when I go to rewrite, that I've got to make sure and do whatever I need to do to be in a higher vibration. And then it'll probably come pretty easy.
Can I offer you something?
Sure can.
There's something I wrote that I believe is my greatest, because it's like a poem. So it's worded, rhymes and all that other stuff. So it involves more than just information. You got to make it catchy. You got to paint pictures. So I wrote this song, and to me, that's one of my greatest creations. Every time I hear it, I'm like, yo, I'm like, yeah. So if you can find something like that you've created, and don't just hold it, don't just look at it, listen to the whole damn thing. Well, I mean, if it's a whole book, then I wouldn't do that. But for me, it's a 4-minute song. I listen to the whole song, and I don't sing the words to it. Because when you sing it, you sing along, the song's over, you move on to the next song. It's kind of like driving home. You get home, you don't really remember the exit you took in the red light. So what I do, I don't sing it, I listen like it's my first time hearing it. I act like I'm a music producer. And I say, how would I take this? How would I receive this? And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty good. And so you got to use a couple of little games that you play. You got to set it up mentally, but it's a beautiful thing once you get it. And then you go into your creative zone and write your paragraphs with that feeling, with that background. So try it. Let me know how it works out,
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank
cool.
you.
I like that. I kind of do the same thing. I'm in the middle of putting some promotional videos together for the summit. And when I do one of these things, I kind of do the same thing. I play it back like I've never seen it before. And usually I try to hide when I see the first version. But it's a good way to kind of not self-criticize, but to look at it from a perspective that's not necessarily your own enthusiastic one. Because you're enthusiastic about what you're doing, but you're also trying to transfer that enthusiasm to the person watching or listening to whatever it is you've created. And that's the trick. If you can put yourself in their shoes, that's when you get the best results.
That's also when you start picking things apart, taking stuff
No
out.
kidding.
You're like, wait a minute, I don't need to have that sentence in there. Let me remove that, or let me switch it and word it differently. And you get to really be a critic for yourself. And I think at the end of the day, that's why I ended up scrapping, my whole entire last speech. It was great. It was a great informational piece about the law of attraction. However, the crowd I'm going to be in front of, I had to cater to them. We'll just put it that way, which means I had to address it differently. There's certain level of certain level of confidence you want to portray, but you don't want to go too far with it, so I basically had to revamp everything, and I did trust in my gut. I didn't want to. I was like, it's New Year's Eve. I got 8 days to memorize this whole thing. And I thought about it. I said, well, last time I had a speech planned, I scrapped it 7 days before the event and rewrote it and completely killed it on stage, which led to my invitation to this event. So,
which is how we know that you killed it on stage, because you wouldn't get that invitation if you didn't.
No. And then I found how much it costs for people to speak on stage, and I was like, oh wow.
Well, for me, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm realizing my hesitancy to go back and look at this again and edit it myself is all my ego. It's like, I was in the zone and I wrote it and I thought I did a great job, and had a girlfriend of mine read it through just to get some feedback from her. And I had to, unfold my arms and listen. And that was all ego. And it's like I have to put my ego aside when I go back to it. Because like you said, I'm not writing it just for me. You know, I can be part of that. And I think that's going to be helpful because I love the stories. But I'm writing for an audience. So it's like, who's my audience? And I need to make it interesting and exciting for them because they didn't live it like I did. And that when you're writing about experiences, you have to find a way to convey what happened, because
The feel.
just like with programming, you know, they forget that we don't know those steps. They don't know the experience. I do, but I'm not thinking about how do I, in words, convey that, to take it out of my head and put it on the page.
You want them to feel what you felt when you were going through it. I didn't realize this until a couple months ago, but I was having a tremendous amount of trouble writing for people who were just in the beginning of law of attraction, learning and experimenting, because I was writing for me and Walt and Summit speakers. You know, I was writing for people like that who are well versed. We know I can skip over this and just go straight to that. And so I had to really take a step back, you know, and do that. And then also write for people who, skeptics, who are going to deny it. No, I didn't manifest my great grandmother dying, you know, when you get all that kind of stuff. So once you really take a step back and once you really get rid of the ego, like you're saying, you can also look at your words and be like, that's not as good as I was enthusiastic about it the first time I wrote it, but I could reword that better. And that's where you get better. The worst thing you could do is write something once, I guess I should say. Write it the first time, be like, man, that's the bomb. It's perfect this one time. I got it in one take. No, go back and read it. Something so you could tweak something. Go back and read it.
It's funny, as we're talking about that, I'm realizing something that I've thought about many times before, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, but not in quite some time, which is it's so important as creators. And I don't mean just creating like a writing project or a speech or something like that. I mean all kinds of creation. You know, creating how our lives are going to be, what kind of job we're going to go for, what kind of relationship we want for a primary relationship, the whole thing, all of that creation is creating. And all creation works better when we learn how to be better storytellers. That's the thing that I'm reminding myself of it over and over and over again. Because, yeah, like you're saying, Louise, we do understand the story ourselves because we lived it. But we're also trying to create that new story, or we're trying to convey that story to somebody else. And in order to do that, we have to kind of relive the whole process of how we got excited in the first place. And that's where the storytelling skills come in.
What is the phrase time is relevant or time is irrelevant? What is that phrase?
It depends what you're talking about. In most cases, time is irrelevant, but sometimes it's relevant.
No, but there's a phrase basically that means it's irrelevant, but for some reason it sounds like it's saying time is relevant. But I want to bring that into this a little bit. I wrote down the best stories. Like if you tell a really good story, it's not going to get forgotten by the person who's listening. Right. They're never going to forget that story, which means they're never going to forget the point. And if they never forget the point, they're always going to implement into their life and make their life just a little bit easier, or a little bit better. And you just did that for them. So when you're creating this story, before you even give that speech or tell it to that person, there's already like a preset. They're going to enjoy this. They're going to use this for life. And then you get a self-gratification before you even tell it to them, based off of how good you made that story. So you're going to want to make it the best story. And at least you're going to want to write the book and best book. And I'm going to want to do the best speech, because we know they're going to get something out of it that's going to change their lives. They're going to teach it to their kids because of what it had done for them and their family members. And we're doing this for them. And it's just a beautiful thing. So really put your all into things like this. Everything you do, you put your all into. But stop, get away from everything, get in the right headspace, and then roll with it. Roll with the punches and pull some great results. and make yourself feel better, make other people feel better. I mean, what else can you do?
Well, I was just realizing you mentioned a couple times now how you have both with the current speech you're working on right now and stuff that you've done in the past, how there have been times where you just kind of threw the old speech out and you just started from scratch, wrote a new one, and delivered that. And there are times that people will actually do that in the flow as they're standing on stage. You know, they don't actually have the speech written.
I've done
But why
that.
does it work so well? And I think the reason it works so well is in order to deliver the speech on the stage, they have to go through feeling it again. And in order to go through feeling it again, they have to express what it is they're feeling. And so it comes out as a story based on what they went through rather than what they think about it.
That you can think too much.
Yeah.
Well, you get in your head too
Exactly.
much as opposed to
In your
from
heart.
your emotions. Yeah.
Do you do any speeches, Walt? Like, you write any speeches?
Every time that I do a podcast, yeah.
No, I mean, but like a pre-written, scripted, this is what I'm going to get memorized.
Not a lot. No, I haven't done a lot of public speaking in that sense.
For those out there who do stuff like that, I want to give you one of the greatest things I think I've realized. In doing a speech, in writing a speech, you have to write the speech or type it or at least voice dictate it. So when you're going from sentence to sentence and you get about however many sentences in and you feel like you need to jot it down before you forget it, in that phase of jotting it down, you're doing a complete energy shift, which means you have to be good at shifting right back into where you were, feeling how you felt to get those best results. That takes a lot of practice for one, and I don't know if all people can do it for two. What I would suggest is speak from the heart and freestyle it into a recorder. You know, you got 10 minutes to cover all these topics. Have your 10 bullet points and just go. Have them written on the wall in the background somewhere and just speak from the heart. That is going to be your speech. That is going to be the one you end up with because it's going to resonate the most with you and it's going to feel great. You're going to tweak it and add some things and mix some things. But try not to have those breaks where you have to write down what you just did. Speak it out verbally into a recorder. Take the effort to go back and stenographer that thing out because that is the one you're going to end up with. That's the best one. It came from the heart. It came from the quantum field. It's like when you have you got 6 problems and you don't know how to solve them, and all of a sudden the answer comes to you that solves all 6. That wasn't you. That was source. Just gave you that. So if you're going to write a speech, why not write the whole thing from source? Which means take you out of the equation.
Just a really interesting point. And I'm not somebody who goes out and gives speeches all the time. I do the podcast a lot. And that is actually a technique I use on the podcast, what you're describing. Literally, there have been times where
that's why I always have my notepad ready because I know what you're doing. I said, "Ooh, he tapped in. He's tapped in. Let's go."
But you know what it's like. I mean, sometimes we start a show and we don't even have a topic in mind. You know, just okay, we're going to start talking about something here, and hopefully it'll turn into a show. And on those occasions, what I've learned to do, it was a little bit scary the first time that I did it, but I've been doing it long enough now that it feels fairly comfortable, is I literally just open my mouth and ask myself, okay, say something and wait for something to come out. And I don't know what it's going to be. That's the scariest part. But something comes out. And the first sentence or two can be a bit halting, but I'll get the first couple sentences out and then I'll kind of think back on what I said and it actually made sense. And not only did it make sense, it was actually pretty good. And now I've got something to talk about. And then it just starts to flow after that. So that's that process you're describing of that's literally letting source take over and send something through your mouth.
There's 2 things that you need to do. You need to have to do what you just did. And not a lot of people exactly have these 2. It's confidence and trust. Because I've seen so many people try that and they go, and that means the information that was sent to them, they said, "No, I'm not going to say that. That sounds too."
Yeah, right. They doubted it.
And then the next thing, they're not trusting the information, and they don't have the confidence to put it out there and say, "Hey, I'm just going to say it. Deal with it," you know. And so I love that you have that, and that's the reason why you're amazing at doing what
I'm glad you pointed that out, by the way, because you're right. You have to just let whatever it is come out. You can't edit it. You can't control it. You can't try to rephrase it. You can't try to make it better. You have to just let it come out. And that is scary.
Yeah.
First voice is source. The second one is you.
Yes.
Third one's probably you, and the fourth one's probably you coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas based off of what you've experienced in your short time on this planet. Whereas source is basing it off of, well, everything.
Now, I've never done written speeches with, a limited time frame. I've done presentations within a time frame, and I was scared, but I enjoyed it, and I was good at it. And the way I knew I was good at it is somebody who had attended similar presentations said most people leave after the break, but everybody came back for mine for the second half. So I was doing something right. But it was within a field that I knew what I was talking about. And I just had bullet points. I didn't need to write stuff down because I was educating and giving examples and using a board. And I could be interactive, and I liked that. I could say to the gathered, give me 5 of this, writing it on a board. Or I think I did one on healthy relationships. Okay, give me, tell me what you think constitutes a healthy relationship. So you've already got the audience engaged because they're thinking and they're interacting. And I liked that because then I didn't feel alone in front of a group of people. And it was storytelling as far as, yes, I'm giving them factual information, but from a very practical, user-friendly kind of atmosphere, because people could identify it in their own lives, either that they do that or that they don't, or, oh, that's a new idea. I never thought of that. How do I apply that? And I enjoyed that. My job didn't require I do much of that. And it wasn't something I pursued outside of the job, but I did enjoy that interaction and the storytelling.
Storytelling. I love the storytelling.
It's huge.
It's huge. I was gonna say huge, but I was like, nah, but it is.
It is huge. I mean, you can't come up with a big enough word for it, to be honest.
Well, if you go back to school, who were your favorite teachers? They told stories.
They did.
I had a Western Civ professor in junior college. You had to get to his class early or you were going to sit on the floor. The room was packed. People hanging out the door. He would come in, open his notebook, and he'd never look at it. He would just tell story about whatever the subject was. Psychology. If my professors had stood there and just given us basic information, forget it. But I can't remember any specifics about it, but I remember my social psych teacher. I loved it. I understood what she was saying and it made sense and I knew how I could then use it. And those are the people I still remember.
Anne-Marie Young, who does the Monday podcast with me and Louis D'Souza, is tuned into the live stream, and she left a couple messages, one of which she says, I'm scared on every podcast, but I always love and learn from them. It's empowering. And that's a great point, because that's exactly what happens. I mean, there's always a certain degree of fear, like you're going to say something stupid or you're going to say something that doesn't make any sense or whatever. And yet, each time that you do say something that's stupid or doesn't make any sense, you get better as a result.
Yeah.
And it's really true. I mean, that actually does become empowering in the long run. You have to kind of be willing to go through it. It's like kind of going through a challenge of fire or something. But once you go through it a few times, it's like, oh, well, there's just a challenge of fire again. Big deal.
Well, even in this kind of a context, you say something, you can expand on it. You can, if you hear it come out and it's out of your mouth and you're not quite happy with it, you can expand on it. My fear, and I never was in the position, but if somebody wanted to interview me, so they're asking me a question, and then you'd answer and they'd move on to something else. I was like, no, I want the questions ahead of time. I want to think my answers, because that's too scary to get caught off guard. But this format, I'm enjoying because, well, it's relaxed. There's no right or wrong answer. And what I thinking or saying may change over the course of the show because somebody else brings something in that I hadn't thought of. And it's okay because we're learning and we're growing, so that I may start the program with a belief, and I'll say it as a belief. And by the end of the show, I'm questioning it. And we do that in some of our after dinner conversations when I'm really tired. And that's when we get into really deep kinds of stuff. And it's like, okay, I'm going to have to sit with that. Walter bring up something a view of something that I hadn't had before. And it's like, I got to digest that. I got to think about that. Plus, let's get back to that when I'm not half asleep.
That's
but
a
that's
beautiful
just
thing.
when we do that.
That's a beautiful thing because most spouses would just disregard it. They're just like, "Oh, you just talking trash. That ain't it." So it's beautiful that you do that. But
that was part of the basis of our relationship. In that our going out to Sunday breakfast, we got into these philosophical and heady kinds of conversations. And I was like, oh, I love this, because none of the men I had dated previously would have valued what I said or would have been able to, it wasn't of interest to them. So there wouldn't have been a conversation. It would have just died, or I just wouldn't have bothered to bring it up.
Yeah, they would have deterred it so many times that you just stopped bringing it up.
Yeah.
And that sucks. That's why I say you guys are lucky to have each other. It's and I use the word luck. I don't believe in luck, but I use it for all intents and purposes. You got a great thing.
Well, I'll tell you honestly, I really do believe that it comes down to what the word relationship means. Relationship means to relate. Relating means talking back and forth and exchanging information and ideas and feelings and thoughts and dreams. If you're not doing that, guess what? You don't have a relationship.
You have an existence.
You have an existence. You may even have a monologue, but it's not a relationship.
Coexistence, yeah. I always figured it had to do with the word relations, and the ship means having relations multiple times. I don't know. That's where I took it.
Well, my background's in codependency and the recovery of that, and so many relationships are dependent. I'm dependent on you and you're counter dependent on me.
So many.
So that our relationships are, like this, as opposed to intertwined. There are times when we're independent of each other, and there are times when we're together on things. That
could cause rifts.
It can.
Because you're going like this, and all of a sudden you're going like this. There's points where you're separated. And then when you're too much. So I get it.
And that's when codependent couples usually fight. It's like we've spent too much time together, so we have to fight. So we push apart, then we get too far apart or too much time. So we have to find some way to come back together, as opposed to it's okay for you to go do what you want to do and me to go do what I want to do, and then come back and let's talk about it, and share that. Or we're growing at different rates, and that as long as we're not too far divergent from each other, it's okay. And it's interesting to share with each other where the other, where I'm going and where are you and what's happening with you, and the different viewpoints. That's one of the things I love about Walt is he'll have, oh gosh, be it politics, be it anything, I'll bring up something. He says, well, he doesn't always present it this way, but I have a different view on it, or a different understanding of that word. And it's like, oh, never thought of it that way. So, and it makes sense given what he's talking about. Do I always agree and say, well, I'm going to shift the way I think? No. But I'm going to consider it.
And I would expect her to.
And that would be boring anyway.
It would be. It would be terribly boring.
But isn't it funny how the energy wave analogy, like of time, is perfect for that scenario. It's perfect because sometimes you're too much into each other and then you fight, which forces you too much apart. And you end up in a relationship that's just fluctuating like that. It's like a perfect analogy dealing with energy waves and frequency. Like that's
Well, there's another analogy that I was thinking about while you guys were discussing this. It's the difference between couples dancing and slam dancing. Couples dancing is coordinated. You're working together. You're doing stuff together. Slam dancing, you're just bouncing into each other.
what is
And then you're
slam
flying
dancing?
away, and then you're coming back together. And it's a dance style from the 80s. But basically, it was like punk rockers slamming into each other, bouncing all over the walls and the ceiling and everything else. There was nothing really enjoyable about it other than it was a great way to get aggression out. But it's not really a dance. Not really. It's a
No.
codependent dance. It's a chaotic dance. Yeah.
Well, it's anger
Yeah.
based. Well,
You're
the thing is, with the interdependence, if you're in a healthy relationship, and I know I've felt it and we've never talked about it, so I don't know if Walt has, especially if we go on vacation or something, so we're with each other all the time, I can tell we start getting on each other's nerves. And it's like, okay, instead of fighting, it's like, okay, I need to go spend some time doing something I want to do without Walt. And then, get dinner or something, come back and talk about it. So instead of having to force that separation, it's recognizing, okay, it's time for some independence. We've been interdependent and maybe, too much together. So we need some time apart. And I've even done that a couple of times. It's like, you know what? I'm going to go visit my friends in Rhode Island. Being together because we work together, we live together, we're basically together 24/7. It's got to have some time away from each other.
Absolutely.
It's
That's part of what
recognizing that
Yeah.
before it gets to that point. That's
Yes.
the whole key to that. And the key to recognizing it is being conscious, waking up, being present. Like I said, being conscious of your feelings and what's going on. This beautiful thing. I was thinking about this earlier. I keep forgetting to say, dare I say that some of the best times in life, or maybe the best times that we experience in life, are both scary and like happy, exciting at the same time.
Sure.
Like you get a promotion, you're excited, but you got a whole new set of responsibilities and tasks. You walk on stage, there's 200, 300 people there. You haven't really memorized your speech. You're a little scared, but as soon as you grab that mic, listen, none of that matters. That piece of paper, you're just gonna flow and say what you gotta say. As I'm sitting here adding up the times in my life when I've been most happy, and they were both scared and excited at the same time. And I was like, is that a thing?
Oh, it is.
Well, is it that they are coexisting or that you let go of the fear and allow yourself to move into the happy? Because as you're saying that about the promotion, you're first happy and then the scared, you kind of let go of that happy and let the fear take over. And then hopefully you drop that and go back in or tamp it down so that the happiness can come up, or looking forward to the challenge.
I think
so
back
that
to
fear doesn't drive it.
I forget what it was. I had signed some kind of deal with somebody, and we went to this club and back in Jersey when I lived out there, and they rented the VIP section, and it was just amazing. And while I was there at this party that they were throwing for me, it was just my feelings were going back and forth, between excited and fear. And it was like, it's not like a fear, like I fear it, so I'm not going to do it, because you're stepping into it. This is something you want to do. And I guess it's just coming out of your comfort zone and a bunch of other things. But I venture to say that most of the best parts of life involve both of those things coexisting at the same time, filling your brain, and it just feels good and scary. But
Do you know what the word is that defines that? It's courage. Being afraid, but doing it anyway. Is having the courage. Because people will say, oh, you were really courageous. No, I wasn't. It doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means there could have been fear, but you did it. You moved forward and did it anyway.
Yeah,
happily. A lot about.
Yeah, happily.
Police officer, yeah.
not just courageously doing it, but happily do it. Like I would do it 6 times a day if you let me. Like that's where it's crazy. That I don't know. I like it because it's like flying. When I fly, there are times where I'm like, yo, I'm dangling from a bunch of strings right now. But then I'm start doing all this, and I start having the time of my life, and it's just that would be just pushing it aside though, because I'm like, whoa, thoughts become things. Can't think like that. As soon as something comes into my head about engine failure or anything, I'm like, thoughts become things. Get that out. So I kind of just switch
you
that
have to
up
move beyond it.
Something you brought up earlier, Louise, that I want to go back to. You mentioned codependency. One of the key things is that delineates and differentiates someone who's codependent from someone who is independent or is a whole person. Let's put it that way. Is the whole person can easily step away temporarily from a relationship, and it's not a big deal. But the codependent person, oh my God, that's the end of the world.
Yeah.
Well, example, the year I went to school in Washington, D.C., I was sort of at the height, almost the height of my codependency. And my boyfriend would go with his parents to their beach house on the weekends. And I couldn't function. I lived in DC. There was a bus system. There was all the monuments and museums and stuff. I could barely get out of my dorm because I was so scared and didn't feel that I existed literally without him, and would freak out like on Sunday night if I thought he was supposed to be back and I couldn't get him on the phone. I couldn't study. I was, just so dependent on that other person for my validation of my being. That was, I didn't realize, well, it was very uncomfortable at the time, but I didn't realize how bad that was.
As I sit back and think about it, I've never felt like that, and I try to trace why I've never felt like that, and I think it's because for as long as I can remember, my parents were separated. So I always saw my dad, because he raised me, I always saw my dad do it on his own, and so I guess that's maybe what kept me from experiencing that. But yeah, I can imagine the feeling, but as far as females, but I know how the feeling for other things, like it feels like literally half your body is gone. Like I don't have my left arm anymore, so I might as well just sit here. I've definitely had that feeling before, just not like with a spouse, and it sucks. It sucks, and being a law of attraction buff now, it makes me feel like I was pathetic back then. Like I was pathetic to think I needed something else, someone else to exist, to just be me. No, being me just means me. Being me is 100% me with 0% anybody else. So it depends on me being alone.
To valuing our own selves, in our entirety. And I remember before we met, I liked my life. I had a really nice apartment. I liked my job. I was making decent money. I'd come home and I had projects I was working on, but I was like, I really don't want to be alone the rest of my life. I like where I'm at, but it'd be nice to have somebody to share it with. Not that, oh my God, I'm however old and I've got to get married and something's wrong with me or whatever. It wasn't a desperation. It was just, I can be by myself, but it's also nice to have somebody in one's life to do things with or to share. And I can't remember who it was that said, why do we get in relationships? It's to have another person know us and to feed back to us our existence. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but to sort of, I'm not even sure how to say it, but it's just to have somebody to reflect back. We all like validation if our whole existence depends on being validated by somebody else. No, but it's nice to have that.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of the movie that came out a few years ago. It was a remake of a Japanese movie called Shall We Dance, starring Richard Gere. And Susan Sarandon's character, she was a supporting actress in that one, basically said that line. She said, people made up because they need somebody to witness their lives.
That's the word. Thank you. And that's probably where it comes from,
Yeah.
to witness our lives.
It's
Thank
so
you.
funny you guys are talking about this. I had this breakthrough the other night. And I'll tell you quickly how it happened. I was trying to proactively manifest. And in this particular situation, I had quote unquote made it. I had a lot of money. I was in Vegas with my little brother, and I was going to give him, a nice little stack of money. Go play. Go have some fun. I'll meet you back at dinner. And that was the scenario. And every time I try to run the scenario, some other thought kicks in and keeps me from it. And all these really great scenarios I want to run, something stops me and then steers me off into 15 other different scenarios before I realized a half an hour ago I had a goal. And so I was really wanted to focus. I'm going to do this. Ended up in a conversation with God somewhere else, not there. And what I mean by conversation with God was I was speaking directly, like I say to him, like me and you are having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I walk by, they're kind of just background, as opposed to just talking out loud. Dear God bless Aunt Joan and Uncle Tim, just talking out loud. And this was the realization I had. I went from this direct conversation with God about whatever we were talking about. And I said, oh yeah, I forgot the whole reason I'm out here is to do this thing with my brother Justice. Not my real brother Justice, because if I try to hand him that amount of money in Vegas and say go play, it's going to hurt my ego. It's going to say, whoa. I was having this conversation with my imagination land brother Justice. And I like to differentiate the two because the imagination one, I can hand him whatever I want. And the ego can't say anything because I got unlimited over there. And that's why I love to spend time in imagination land with these imagination characters. Besides the fact that I have no clue what my brother's doing right now, but I know exactly what that one's doing. So anyway, I went back to have this conversation. And as I went back to have it, another essence was in over there. And it went like this. And then it let me go. And I realized something. As I was going to talk with Justice, I realized that wasn't Justice. That wasn't God. That was someone else, something else. And I said, wait a minute, what is that? So once again, I deterred from talking to Justice. But I went to study it, and it took me about a half an hour, 45 minutes. I got it all, talked it into a recorder, but I ended up calling it God Audience. You know how I do. God Car is any and every car. If aliens came and we were like, we have these things called cars, they're forward vehicles. I kind of just call it God Car, and every car I ever drive is God Car, just coming to me in different forms. I give them different labels, red, blue, that one belongs to the neighbor. It's all just God Car to me. And so this was God Audience. And where I took it was when I'm talking out loud, not directly to God, not directly to an imaginary being, when I'm just talking out loud or just talking in my mind, everything you say in your mind, something is listening. And I never gave that being, that essence, a not physical body, but I never put it into a being before. But when I did, it was like, thank you for always listening, for always watching. Every single word I said, it was just sitting there waiting for my next word. And I was like, wow, I have a really great appreciation for audience. And I said, whoa. Appreciating an audience manifests more of an audience.
It does.
So this is a perfect mental exercise for someone like me or you all who, we live for our audiences. And so, yeah, it's given that essence. At the end of the day, it's God at the end of the day. But being able to appreciate it in a different way, that's going to cause me to appreciate it more. Because ever since that moment, has been at least, how mental exercises are. You did 5 of them today. Tomorrow you probably do 1 or 2 because life just comes at you. I've hit this at least 20 times a day for the past 2-3 days. Like I'll just be thinking, and as I'm thinking about whatever I'm thinking, I'll just be like, thanks for listening. Thanks for always being there to listen. So it's a great mental exercise that I suggest you try. Walt, take advantage of it because, like I said, when you're in your imagination and you're dealing with a specific character, that character is listening to you. When you're talking to God, it's listening to you. But when you're just talking out loud, coming up with ideas, the reason why you're voicing it is because you know deep down inside something's picking it up. Even if it's just you registering what you said to come up with the next idea, something's picking up. That's why you're voicing it. And appreciating it, it's just appreciating another part of life that I wasn't giving it a second thought to before. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
No, I like that. That's very cool, because what you're really talking about is witnessing your own life. You're doing it through your inner being, but you're witnessing your own life.
Yes.
That's very good. I like that a lot.
It's being one while being separate, while being one while being separate.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing, but you gotta get deep, man. If you want to improve in this mental area, you gotta get deep and discover different things and be open to different ideas. So I encourage that, man. Get deep, get quiet, ask questions, wait for the answers.
One other thing I wanted to bring in here too. We talked earlier about being in vibrational spaces, shall we call it? We've mentioned codependency, for instance. That's one of these vibrational spaces. Lower vibrational spaces where we're out of sync, we're out of alignment with ourselves, we're out of sync with others. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on like that, and that's where we get a little bit afraid. That's where we get a little bit nervous about stuff going on. The point that I want to make is that's where we do our best learning to become the better part of ourselves. I mean, you went through all that codependency earlier in your life, Louise. And you and I talked about this earlier on in our relationship, very early on. We talked about, well, why didn't we meet earlier? Well, because we needed to work on ourselves first. But once we worked on ourselves, once we went through that period in each of our lives, I mean, the period you described was a pretty difficult one, a pretty challenging one, but it turned you into somebody amazing. Or more precisely, you turned yourself into somebody pretty amazing because you grew from it.
Right.
You said, I'm not going to stay in this space. I'm going to evolve. I'm going to change. I'm going to grow. I'm going to get better. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to find that ideal relationship I've been looking for. I'm going to find that life I've been looking for. And in the process of doing that, you drew on the energy that you created in that negative place.
And created a whole nother person.
That's it.
A whole nother person who's able to stand on her own. You know,
so when people
want to, but you could.
So when people feel that they can't find things to appreciate, you can start with appreciating the things that you came out of.
Yeah. Well, I said to Walt, within the first year of our relationship, because he was so open and trusting and whatever, that I could be and appreciated who I was. I could just be myself. And I said to him, if you ever told my friends the way I am with you, they wouldn't believe you. They wouldn't believe you because I didn't see them on a regular basis. So they didn't see the change and we didn't interact in that way. So they had no experience of who I had become. And I remember a couple of times with these are girlfriends I've had since 8th grade, and voicing my opinion, which I never did before. And I didn't get feedback from them. It got kind of quiet, and I'm like, no shit, they didn't, they didn't like that, or they didn't believe what I was saying or whatever. And, they're not going to like me. And finally I just got to the point, it's like, I realized, well, we've been together 22 years. So, they're still my friends. We still get together. That, they have an acceptance of me on some level and to who I have become. And to be okay, to trust that they're not going to go running for the hills because now Louise has a voice. Louise has opinions. Louise believes differently than they do and I've organized my life differently than a lot of them have. And that's okay.
You know what, Tracy Morgan, it sounds crazy, but he says, it doesn't matter. The universe stops when I go to sleep. When I'm in a room with no windows, the only thing on the outside of the walls is infinite darkness and possibilities. Those friends don't even exist anymore until you give them that light. So, shape them into what you want them to be, how you want them to think. He kind of went on that tangent a little bit, and I like it. I was like, you know what? It allows me to create what people think about me, which I could use the law of attraction to do anyway. So
Well, this has been great. Debbie actually texted me in the middle of the show. She was hung up on the freeway, so she wasn't able to join us. But that's okay, because this turned out to be a really great conversation. So thank you, Neil, for all of your insights. Thanks for bringing up the topic, too. It was a good topic today that you brought to us.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you, Luis, for blessing us again with your presence.
You're welcome.
2 times in 1 month. I feel honored. I kind of slightly feel like, it's because of me. But
well, it is because of you. You asked.
That's it.
Given.
That's right. That's right. Happy New Year. Stay safe and healthy.
Yes, everyone. Happy New Year's. Happy New Year's to you too.
And Happy New Year to all of our listeners. Thank you for being listeners. We hope you'll continue to listen in 2022, and we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.